starting 5 minutes early because that's what I do. All right. I hope everybody's having a good day. I have been, well, my morning's been busy. And so since I got home, we've been getting some stuff done. And as with me as always is Corbano here. Corbin, you say hi? He hit me. Punched me in the hip. That was him saying hi. Yeah, I'm right here. What are you talking about? Who are you talking to? So, today, the suggestion that I had for yesterday was Zimu for two from Yolanda, Devin Rex for Art. I don't know what this refers to. So, Corbin, Linda says hi. Corbin says hi, Linda. Hi, Tim. So, it's just an open statement, really, when you think about it. Zimu for two. If it pertains to something particular, that was lost on me. I even looked it up, and all it is this exotic tribe in South America that are the caretakers of the forest. So I don't know. So anyhow, so I was working on two things. One was spell that Z-E-M-U, Zimu, for two. So, and it came from Yolanda. Thank you for asking that, Linda. So I had two things to do last night, and one was I wanted to sit down with the 22 panels that always work by Wally Wood, and to start interpreting my version of those. And I'd done the first 4 during the stream, and so I'm going to pull these up. So I'm going to switch cameras really quick. So this is the 22 panels that always work. Okay? Zimu for 2 is today's suggestion from Devin. Oh, okay, thank you, Linda. And so this was me starting to interpret each of these individually, one at a time. Okay, and to walk through that process. And then I was continuing on open panel, complete object, car, plane, whatever. Remove most of the background or frame. So, where you'll see square or rectangular frames drawn around here. No such thing there. And playing with ideas like a spaceship moving through or a car flipping. A spaceship, I guess, again. A lot of spaceships here. This one's doodly doing across the screen. This one's on an angled trajectory. This one's just floating freeform. This car is flipping. It works to an extent, but it doesn't carry as much as it could if you involved the composition around it. So, but it's just an object floating in space. Now, so I thought I'm going to continue on and do my versions of these tonight, but I also have to do a page for today. So what I decided instead was to take Wally Wood's 22 panels, 22-ish panels, and to start to interpret those, but incorporating them into a story. And so what I did is I put together a page layout. I'm just going to turn it this way, you can see all of it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 by 1, 2, 3. So that's the breakdown. That's the layout of the page that I came up with. And so there's the white version of it. So it's just lined boxes, and I can lay over any other sheet. And I don't necessarily think you can see the lines. Maybe you can if I do this. But so I laid that over top with this random scrap piece of paper. And I started drawing out a story. Character with big head. In a background that I don't know why I put there. Because that's not even where he's standing. But, so character with big head. And then our next one is back ahead, part of head. So here's these two characters talking. Then I've got an L shape. And then I've got a background white Ben-Day, the forward is silhouette. So the idea here is and I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see this just a little more clearly. So big head, straightforward. Now I haven't inked anything because I just penciled it and then, time was up. So back of head, part of head, right? Or in this case, it's just a side profile. L shape. Now this L shape, while it still sits in the space, I also added in this brick wall in the foreground that just gives some more interest and complexity to the panel. But the L shape is still there. And then this shot here, where I've got the couple walking along this promenade that they are at in the previous panel, moves the eye down diagonally, and so do the shoulders. So then here's the two of them walking along the promenade, but in the foreground I have that brick wall again. There's the corner of it right here. But I've also put a post with some kind of, light, the base for a light fixture of some kind that illuminates the path. So the idea here is that with each of the bricks, I would be filling those in with a black ink. And so that silhouette would sit in the foreground. Okay. And would define a different plane than the background, which is, the background's intention is white or Ben-Day dots. So, and you could do that by drawing the characters here with a little bit of detail and just simple line for the background. So then the next one, I've done an open panel, complete object. And so here he is holding the door open for the lady, and which people should do. And getting into their car. It's an old Stingray. And the next is a frame in a frame. And so I've got the two of them sitting inside the car. And we're looking through the front window of the car to see them sitting inside there, frame within a frame. And then we've magically moved through the glass into the car where we see the two of them talking. Now this is this one right here. Okay? Which I describe as two characters on the same, like they're agreeing with one another. Their language is facing forward and just a simple dialogue, relaxed posing. So I call that two characters on the same side in agreement. So then my next one is Ben-Day, the leave the room texture one, which is another one of the ones that aren't really drawn in. Okay, so but he's described what the elements are that are in it. It's the panel has got somebody leaving the space in the panel, leaving the room, but it's got wallpapers, drapes, bricks, some sort of visual complexity to it. So in this case, I've put the trees in these trees in the foreground so that we can really go out of our way to draw in the bark on the tree. Next one, pretty straightforward. Extreme close-up. Extreme close-up. So then which is, it's pretty much what it is, right? So the next panel is a 3-stage. So we're showing the front of the car again, which would be in intermediate values, right? That would be complex lines or gray tones. And behind that directly is the bushes would be blackened out. And then white into that background area. So it separates the three different planes using those value systems. So following panel, no border on it again, just like the open panel, complete object. I decided to have this panel not have a border. And my reasoning behind that is that I wanted it all washed out to just accentuate the high contrast aspect of this. And the two characters that were sitting in the car are extremely illuminated and no longer in the car. They're now in some kind of void. That's Zimu. So then they wake up, or they land, they're deposited in this circular shaped area, which is all silhouetted out behind him, all blackened out behind him. And there's our reverse silhouette black. Okay, so then I go to one big object. Now, I have a note for myself, larger. I would like to take that ship and make it move all the way up to the edge of the characters and just enlarge it just a little bit to just push that scale factor. So the following panel, and this is the one that usually has a finger pointing, a gun pointing, a cannon, whatever it is, the edge of a sword, you know, the antenna of a spaceship or of an aerial tower, whatever it is, but it's somehow driving into the panel, right? So then the next one that I did is reflection, and so reflection is showcased in Wood's 22 pages by having somebody looking down at a puddle and seeing themselves in said puddle. And this is the idea of, with reflection, there's two parts of that. One, his image is visually reflected in, you know, the surface of the water or a mirror or whatever it is. But at the same time, hey Buckaroo, you allowed to be up there? So, the same time, it has them reflect on themselves or their situation. So, in this case, the camera lens that's at the front of this flying around doodly-doo reflects their image back at them in its lens in the foreground. So that's, and then we got the same recurring motif of the angled black background in here. And so for the next panel, I try to do depth. And depth shows our two tiny people on the ground. Here's the first doodly-doo. Let's just call it a camera, a flying camera. And so here's other ones in different scales and trying to show some flight paths for these things to give the idea that these suckers are buzzing all over the place. And I mean, if I was to take it further, I would put the shapes of the tops of heads or whatever it is to give the idea that this is an entire stadium that's all directed towards what's going on in the middle here, and that we are, you know, so you could even go so far as to have some heads and shoulders of characters that we're able to make out in the foreground that reduce down. But the idea is to show that they're this tiny little bit in this larger space, which has another larger space around it and this large domed roof, you know. So just trying to play with that idea a little bit. So then the next one is a downcast. I better move this. The next one is a downcast shadow. So I've got this extremely illuminated area that they're sitting within, and it projects the shadow in behind them, and it would project the shadow of the hand on the body, right? Little things. So like the shadow would come across here. So it's downcast shadow. And then the next one, side or top light, is what I went for, which again continues on this hyper illumination that's going on. And here's the same source. The source has not changed about where that light's coming in from. So, and then the final panel of this page, which is 18 panels, so I've got 18 of the 24 here, is profile, no background. I can get away with that because we've already identifiably established that it's really, really bright, this little area that these two characters are sitting in. As there's, you know, wherever they've been, you know, whisked away to, which is, in my head, Zemu for two. And so, you know, the part you can play with the dialogue throughout here with these panels is to say, we are the people of Zimu. Your Earth was facing immediate destruction. We chose you two as the representatives of hello, the representatives of your species, and we've made you this little space for living. It's sort of a play on Slaughterhouse-5, written by Kurt Vonnegut. In Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-5, the principal character is teleported away to Tramglafalidor or something like that. I can't say it. I've never been able to say it. But Tramfalidor, some opposite side of the universe, alien space planet, where he finds that he himself and a lady from Earth are basically in a zoo cell. Tramfalidor, it's going to bug me all day. And so they're there to be studied by these space aliens, which are kind of like giant hands. They're basically like giant hand people, which is why I liked the film Denis Villeneuve did recently. I can't remember its name. About First Contact for us with these all these big tubular ships that show up around the Earth, and we're trying to figure out a way to communicate with them. And when we finally see what they look like, they're kind of octopus hand people, similar to Slaughterhouse-5. So I see you, pal. I see you. So I thought I'd riff on that a little bit and put them basically in a giant arena where they're being studied or watched by these Zimu aliens. That's your trade-off for the two of you is to live, is that, here's where you're going to be spending your time. So walking through this whole thing, and to sit down, and I pull back out on the camera again. So to sit down with this 18-paneled sheet, and to start to break down a story, it has a couple things come from this. Okay, one is we're catching the. It's not just a case of just trying to do Wally Wood's 22 panels that always work, but it's informing us of. It helps you to understand the beats of your story. And by trying to represent each panel in a specific way, it's giving you some sort of insights. But so what I thought was this, though. So we've started here, okay, with these examples he's given. We've tried to craft a narrative out of this using our. Can I get through here? Sorry. Corbin's on my desk, and it's just completely standing in the way, because that's what he does. So now that we've got these elements that have paced out our story, how can we take this a little bit farther and push it into a less clinical breakdown of the page? Now, there's nothing wrong with utilizing the panels and staying with the panels. And then this way, he's going to attack that pen. On cue, buddy. There's nothing wrong with leaving your page layout like this, because it's sort of timed out your story. It's given everything this rhythmic element. But the challenge of this is you can lose your readers this way. I've shown recently. I've shown Keith Giffen's 9-panel format, which is utilized by numerous creators over the years, but most prominently done by Dave Gibbons when he illustrated The Watchmen, written by Alan Moore. So that 9-panel format's great, but that 9-panel format, when not handled in a way that has some sort of visual sophistication or interestingness, it can be really boring. These pages can be really boring if they're not they're not laid out in a way that just sort of capitalizes on utilizing that format. But what I thought I'd try is see, right in the way. What are you biting at? Get out of here. Get out of there. Leave that alone. So what I thought we'd do is we take our panels and we start figuring out the rhythmic device of this page. Okay? And, okay, you gotta move because you're just biting everything like an oddball. Get out. Here you are. Here's your spot right beside me, buddy. So with that in mind, okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this page, this random piece of paper that I've got here, and we're just going to make some page formats. Okay, we're going to do it in a profile style, or portrait style, I'm sorry. Okay, so we've got 4 here to scribbly dibble with. Now, we've got options here. We've got 18 panels, right? Which we can break down into, let's say, 3 pages. Okay, let's pace it out to 3 pages. So, if with that in mind, our first page is going to contain these 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements, right? Now, we know that we've laid them out in an interesting kind of fashion, but how do we take that even farther and explore it even more? So, I'm going to start with big head, okay? So, big head. Now, we can draw the big head exactly the way that we've drawn it in our breakdown, but we can eliminate the frame around it. So here's our big head, just peeking in there. If we want to round the top a bit off, it's our prerogative. So there's our big-headed guy. There he is making the introductory statement in our narrative. Here he is sort of drawing the reader in, giving him a taste of where we're going with things. But then let's use this panel shape right here. And the reason I say let's use it right here is because it carries over our character, but it gives us some room, and it introduces our second character that they're in conversation with. But it gives us some room for these text balloons that are coming from him in a kind of responsive space for them. Okay? But we get to have fun again with this third panel. Now, one of the things that we can do with the third panel is to embed this image underneath these two. What we're trying to get across is the fella and the lady walking together on this path. Okay? And we've got their cast shadow. We know it's an L shape that we're utilizing here. But what we can do is extend the visual elements that are in this frame out and around them, so that we know that here's a bridge, and that allows us to cut up our image a little bit, and we'll throw this brick wall in the foreground and continue that element up farther. Now we can do a border and a border here. That's if we so choose, you know. But it's still utilizing the compositional arrangements that we've put together, just in a little more interesting way, right? So then that leaves us with the background white, Ben-Day figure silhouette. And so how can we incorporate that into the composition? Now we've got 3 more aspects to fit on this page. Okay. One is the 2 of them walking together. So we could probably float this panel right here inside of the lower part of this composition. Let's move it over a little bit more so we can really carry on that L shape. Okay? A little more cast light. And so here's the two of them walking along, and they've got this post, and then there's the brick wall continued into this smaller panel. Now, that leaves us with the car. I'm going to do this. Okay, so that leaves us with two things. It leaves us with them sitting inside the car, and it leaves the introduction that they're getting into the car and the fella's helping the lady out. So if we put this car panel, so we know we're going to put the two of them sitting inside the car here. Oh, we're in a car, look at us driving. But we're going to put the car itself where he's helping her to her seat, like take her seat, being a gentleman, opening that door up. And we've got this panel stand on its own without any framing device around it. We could even have it overlapping into this panel here, so that it draws the viewer along. Now, the angled elements that are in this composition here should help to direct the eye. They should help to direct the eye this way. They should. It's all about how we place the balloons, and that's the second part of that, the fusion of two elements. So if here's our guy, here's our gal, there's our door. And then here's the couple inside the car. And that line is moving backwards again. So here's our panel shapes. Okay? There we go. So if this is the breakdown, so we've got our 1, our 2, our 3, our 4, our 5, and our 6th panel paced out on our page to just keep it interesting. Now, the reason that, some of my thinking here, okay? The reason that I blew this one up is that even though we start with this guy, even though we relate the two characters as speaking to one another, this being the bigger panel on the page isn't about a timing thing as much as it is about establishing the context for the narrative. So, and centralizing the characters on the page and having the tonal shift right here in this panel so that it does make that L shape. Just keeps on with the pattern of the panel, the compositional pattern. But the whole idea here is now to take the word balloons, and so I already started doodling them in, and I'm going to pop in just a little bit closer so this makes a little more sense right now. So now I've got panel 1, panel 2, so panel 1, big head, panel 2, back of head, part of head, or in this case it's a profile. Panel 3, which is this one, blown right up for an L shape, serves to establish the context of the narrative. So they're walking down this promenade by the water, okay? Just walking and talking. Number 4 is the background white bende figures in silhouette, or foregrounds in silhouette. And so we're going to put that image right here, okay? There's the foreground and silhouette. But the line of the characters, the diagonal line to them, should direct the viewer's eye that way, coupled with where we place the dialogue. So if he's talking and she's responding, and then because of positioning and the fact that hit the back of his head and where she's standing, they've now turned around and are walking towards us. So she's here, he's here, which means we get to do this with the dialogue. We can route it to him again. Okay, and then there's the response, and then we're back to him again. And because of allocation of panel, we can have her respond once again, right? Or he'll say, what do you think? And then she says, I don't know. Do you really think that'll work? And so what we're doing now is, as much as the visual elements are all working in accordance to how we want to direct, you know, how the viewer moves through the page, we're really going to push that farther forward with the text. And so she'll say, you know, what do you think? And she says, I don't know. Do you really think that the world's going to end? And so she's responding here. And then the next part is him in the car and goes, I don't know, maybe. And she says, and then she can say something in response to that. But what we're doing with the balloons, I should have had a color, something color. I do. What am I talking about? So I'll use a colored pen to show these panels. Okay. So if our word balloons do this, and then she responds here, and then we go back to him blathering on, and then him once more, okay, and then her responses to that. So I'll differentiate the two panels by coloring his in and leaving hers blank. So if this is his dialogue and it takes us to her, and then he responds, and then what do you think? And then her response is there, and then we cut back to him going, I guess so. And then she can say something like, look, let's just go home. But what we're doing, so as much as the text has got some interesting complexity to it, you could use this space right here for the title, blah, 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 because it's the first page of a story, for the credits of whoever's working on it, or even just allow yourself to bump these two over here a little bit more. But what we're doing with the eye is that we're moving it through. If I draw this panel beside here, we're moving the eye like this. So we're taking from, you know, our character in the left corner, and we're going to end up in the bottom right. It's more of a center thing, to be honest, but it's still associated by Big Head over here, who's talking it out. So, in theory, this page works by being a little more complicated than just the simple, basic rectangular shapes that we have for our initial rough of our panels. Okay? So I'm going to pull back out again. So if you can think of another way to utilize these shapes, these composition based on Wally Wood's 22 panels, these first 6, play with that. Play with that layout. Play with that breakdown on the page. There's other ways we could have done this. You could have done, let's try something else. So if we start with Big Head, okay, talking head, and we jump over here to there he is, there's the back of head, there's the side, or part of head, or in this case it's a profile, right? And then we can have another panel that simply moves across this space here. And then we've got our guy, we've got our gal, we've got our cast shadow, we've got our brick wall in a way. Okay. So then we move down to our next panel, which is, this is going to work almost as a reversal from the top panel. Okay. So the idea here is if this foreground is silhouetted out with the bricks, and here the two of them are walking and talking. Okay. We can take the car for the open panel, the complete object, and put the car right here. And as he helps the lady into the door, like opens the door for her of the car, so we can help her into the car. And then for this last panel where the two of them are coming up with their resolution, and we're doing it as a frame in frame, we can do it like this, where we put the two of them in their car, and it's the same compositional elements, right? It's the exact same compositional elements. The difference is the arrangement of it. Now there's more dynamism in this. There's more overlap and engagement between the visual elements. But there is a recurring and some recurring story motifs that are happening in here of open face, closed. There's a break here, closed face, open. There's a break here, so it's just as viable. And then, of course, the dialogue for everybody can still be, if you're working from a script, you can still have him saying whatever he's saying, and then this panel is her response to that, and then we've got, some room to move our eye through here, and then how each of them are saying whatever they're saying. But it's just a case of experimenting with the same sort of a compositional element, but just in different layouts and different presentations. And so when we are down at our, and then we can even add a little bit of a okay from him at the bottom. So we've taken, I'm going to pull back in again. So now we've taken those first 6 panels and done a very different structural layout. But with said structural layout, it's still hitting all the same notes and it's still moving the eye around. But now our lines are going this way, and then back to this way, and then back to this way, and then back to this way for our text. So the eye is moving back and forth, and back and forth in the page, right? Is this helping? Is this of benefit for folks? So let's take these first 6 panels one more time. One more time! And let's try another different layout with these, okay? So if we're going to shake up the way that we're going to do something in the middle of this to this. So if we start with our big head, okay? You're not helping me, Corbin. So we've got our big head. Okay, we're going to redo this top line like we had on the second version. Okay, but then we can take this panel and cut it straight across so that here's our 2 people walking. There's the cast. There's the brick wall that moves into off the page, off the panels, wraps around here, this recurring element. We can start to shadow this out once we get over to this point so that by the time we're up here, this is all blacked out. And then this element that is coming up behind the couple in our image here, we can carry that up there. So that now allows us to tone that out so that we can have an interesting shade that moves through here behind our first panel, but it suits the second or the third composition, the third compositional element, and yet it still works effectively as a background for Big Head talking in the first one. So it's just another interesting arrangement to try putting the characters together. But we've got very different shape language, not quite as, grand as the first page that has this far more vertical layout, top to bottom, whereas this one has more of a horizontal layout done vertically. Right? Right, Chris. This has got our horizontal, but we've broken it. Okay, so in this third version of it, we've got, it starts off with our horizontal approach again, like we did in version 2. But we break that pretty directly because this is all one image. But that image is the scope of it includes these two panels. So we've now taken a step away from just horizontal and vertical movement. We're still in this horizontal movement, but it's almost like you've gone from rectangle, you've gone from rectangle to square. So there is a variation there. Now you could consider it this element distinctly like another square, but the truth is, or distinctly like another rectangle, but truth is that it takes up this large percentage of the page. So in number 1, we did this, kind of very artsy overlap of panels and broken panels and so on and so forth. In number 2, we did a more static and laid off panels with a stronger frame of reference around them. So now in our third one, we're trying to incorporate those two things together. Allow ourselves to have insight into our page that's similar to this really open concept one, but at the same time allowing ourselves to meter it out a little bit more, like our second one. So the next visual element is the two people walking along the bank, but it's the background's white or bandé, and the foreground is silhouette. So we can shake this communication language up again, because we've got all this space of our page. We've basically used up, it's between 2/5 and half, okay? But if we put this panel in here that cuts just inside of the third panel, and we have this panel where our two characters are walking and talking, yakety yak yak yak, and we're going to continue this visual silhouette element. But what we're doing here, which might be of interest, these bricks are like so. Okay, we can see the bricks defined because they have light on them. But by the time we use them in this way, these bricks are shadowed out. So it sort of reverses the visual element, just for interest's sake. And that leaves us with two more elements. We've got the car, okay, and then we've got the two of them sitting in the car. So then it just becomes a case of deciding for ourselves, how do we want to approach this? If the two of them sitting in the car, sorry, I'm going to move it up to there. Can't reach anything, Corbin. You're on it. He's just sitting across all the pencils again. I moved him earlier in the stream, and he's just laid down in the same spot. At least this time he's not biting everything. So we're going to put this panel going out to the extremist of our frame within a frame for, like we have similar in our previous iterations of it. And we're going to put our car here. But we can have that car and its shadow peek over top of this frame. So as the two of them are sitting here in the window and they're yakety yakking, just to make it interesting, we've put the car bumping into that panel a little bit. So this is incorporating similar elements to our first version and incorporating similar elements to our second version, but a little tighter pacing, a little more uniform in its pacing approach. That's why it's a smart idea to try to, at least in your head, try to lay out your page a couple of different ways. So I'm going to pull the camera back out so we can see the three of them together now. So here is our three versions. You got your open. So there's your open concept. And then there's your more uniform panel concept. I'll put panel right there, open panel concept, uniform panel concept, and then this is your halfway point, open, and the uniform concept. This is utilizing some of the interesting progressive movements we got through here, but it's also keeping in this sort of pacing, this horizontal layer pacing. So we've managed to do that again here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Whereas this is a much larger image than this one. This is a much larger image that encompasses these two, except for they're overlapped by this one, which is a bit of a smaller frame. And then the bottom part of the page is just sort of like a summation with these last two panels. So it's, I would, depending on what your like is, what your visual like is, if you like a lot of older comics, you know, you're an old school guy, you might gravitate more towards that. And what I mean by old school guy is old, like, or if you prefer a more simplified approach, that there's an easy readability about your page, you would probably prefer number 2, right? 1, 2, trois, quattro. Anyways, so contemporary, you're more like this. Okay? Classic, going back into the 40s, 50s, 60s, you're seeing 70s, you're seeing more of this. And then this is sort of like a nice fusion point between the two, which takes the things that we've learned from both of these and starts to inform us on a more interesting way to explain this out. So arguably this is modern as well, but it's modern with more formalism to it. So, I mean, so here's one more thing. Okay, we've got our 6 panels. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you've established the pacing of the page. You want to get these 6 elements in here. Right? Right! So who says that we have to be locked into a certain type of panel shape? Okay, so we know what the elements are within our composition for each panel, but can we shake that up a little bit? Let's try our first panel. Let's close it off this time. We'll put our talking head in it, right? And but over top of that, we're going to place our second panel. Okay, so now we're going back into these more interesting approach to it, but we're going to try to hold on to some of this formalism, but to really change up our approach. So this panel has this overlapping it. Okay, so it tends to make our eye go 1, 2. Now, if in our third panel, if we put this underneath the 2 of them, okay, so if we put the third panel that falls underneath those, because this is jumping over top, we're going to go to that, but then our eye is just automatically going to drop down to the next one. So we can shake it up a little bit here and continue this conversation of the 2 of them that's moving this way to here, and we can put a border break between there, and here's the 2 of them talking. There's the silhouette foreground, and then we're going to have the car as he helps her into the car like a gentleman. And then that leaves the final part of it with, you know, we can do a panel under a panel, we can do a cut line across the top and just have, you know, here's the window of the car. You know, whatever we like. I would tend to prefer to leave a closed panel shape because we don't want to interfere too much with our open panel with the car in it, right? And give it its own ability to stand by itself without what we've done earlier, which is having an overlap in number 1 and overlap in number 3. I like this of it standing on its own and being just a borderless panel. So why don't we just let this bottom panel have its own frame? And then there's Bob and Mary in the car. Okay, so there's our 4th approach at our page. And it's just another one that is applying a more modern, more value to the art aesthetic that started in the 1990s. But it has, subjectively, it is a little more formal than our number 1, okay? Because number 1 has all kinds of broken shapes and broken sizes. Number 2, complete opposite formalism. Number 3, fusion between the two, applying the formalism to this. But number 3, I'm not a fan of number 4. I'm not a fan of number 4. Because number 4 feels like a 90s comic. And the thing about 90s comics, there's a big wow, big cool factor that a lot of people really appreciated and enjoyed about 1990s books. The problem is that a lot of times they don't read very well, I find. Yeah, I have some friends that are similar and some friends that have a different viewpoint. But this whole jump of shape, jump to shape here, overlap of shape here, break of shape there, break of shape there. So we've got half of the page is overlapping factors, and then the next part of the page is standalone factors. So we've got 2 separate styles of page, right? So I would argue that this isn't as successful as the previous 3. So I'd be interested, and if you want to put in the comments for this video, if you're watching it afterwards, or if you're watching now and you want to write it in the chat, I'd be interested in finding out what people's preference would be for these pages. And, because that sort of says something towards your sensibility of storytelling and your preferences of storytelling, at the very least, when it comes to sequential application. So, without wanting to spoil it, if you don't want to know what my take on it is, cover your ears or jump ahead 20 seconds. But for me, I think looking at this whole thing, I think that 3 is the most successful, but I prefer 1. Simply because of I'm an illustrator. I like to play around with the visuals, but I think 3 is honestly the most successful one of the 4. We could try the next 6. People interested in that? We can give that a go. I'm just gonna. So I'll put some. So there's our number 1, okay. And I'll grab a piece of paper and we'll do a number 2. Susanna says, just passing by to say hi. Hiya, Susanna. Thanks for passing by and saying hi. Okay, so. There we go. All right, so here's our 18 panels, uniform size, laid out. And then here is our reinterpreting different ways that we can lay out our page that isn't confined to these rectangular uniform shapes for pacing. I mean, let's go back 1 second, okay, before I jump to the next one. If you are to sit down and to break the 18 panels down into a uniform size page. Now, there's a lot to be said for that. David Latham fantastic artist did a book called Stray Bullets, and the entirety of Stray Bullets was in a uniform format, and it read wonderful because there was something encouraging about this rhythmic consistency through the entirety of the project. We can take our 6 panels and we can break them down on our page. No, I've made a mess of it already. Okay, so there is as much benefit to doing this with your storytelling as there is to, like, this is just the full-on formalism. Okay, this is just fully formal, our 5th approach. There's nothing but pure rhythmic sense. What it does for our stories, it has snap, 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 snap as our pacing. Whereas this has more of a snap, and then here's a larger panel, our one down below, next level, there's a break, and our one below, our panel, our row below that is back to 3 again. 3, 2, 1, 3, 1, 1, 2. Okay? This is 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Hi, bud, you're back. So, whatever works for people is what I'm saying. Whatever your preference is. If people would prefer number 5, you just really enjoy formalism. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Formalism gives us a 9-panel grid. This is your 9-panel grid right here. Right? Now just imagine that square filled in. Right? There's your 9-panel page. And it gives you a clear understanding of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But I just didn't even consider in my head. Just leave it as it is and put them down as that. That's especially a quick fix, by the way. If you've laid your whole project out, you got it all set like this, but you're under the constraint of a timetable. Well, there we go. We got the 6 of them. Let's just there we go. Let's just put them down. Okay, so there's our page 1. Okay, of our 18 pages. First 6 panels of the 22 panels that always work by Wally Wood. Now our next section. Okay, we've got 2 characters side by side in agreement. We've got the Ben-Day living room texture, and we've got the extreme close-up, 3-stage image, high contrast, and reverse silhouette back. So there's a big thing happening in here. Okay, there's a big action in the middle of this page, which is going to make some interesting approaches to how we tell this. So if we've got, they're in the car is driving, he says something, we can have a little shimmer effect around our car here, but then these 2 panels here, there's a huge transition of action. So this is Corbin, I know you're there. This is, basically story point 1, and this is basically story, and then it leads into story point 2. I'm trying to draw, he's holding my arm the whole time. So, okay, so we're going to look at this. Now, let's start with our first, the formalist approach, okay? So I'll put our first rectangular shape here. I'll do another one there. One more here. Let's see if we do 5 out of this as well. Maybe we don't need to at this point. So our formalist approach is 1, 2, 3, and this is the extreme close-up. And then number 4 is the car. Right, there's the car, big wheel, window. Okay, and then we've got the 2 of them. What's going on? Okay. So they go from the sitting position in the car to sort of half sitting, half flying through space. and then it ends with the two of them on the ground in front of this arena. Okay, so there's our formal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 equal rhythm. Now, but we know our page starts with the two of them in the car talking about, you know, do you think the world's going to end, Carl? I don't know. Maybe it is, Thelma. Maybe it is. You know. So there's our first. So here's our first panel here. Okay, the two of them side by side in agreement in the car. And then we jump to this reverse shot, the back of the car going through the woods. So if there's the two of them in the car yakking it up, okay, one of the right away, right off the hop, we can do something a little more interesting, and that is I'm going to put that tree here, and then I'm going to put their car right here as it's moving through the woods. And then we'll just run that panel straight across the top. Yes, Corbin, I see you, bud. Corbin, the arm hugger. Okay, so here's our car, and here's our tree. Just going to change that placement just a little bit. There we go. Okay, and then here's other trees and so on and so forth in the background, so that some of these little elements that are in here black out into a border around our first panel. Okay, so there's our first panel. It has action 1 or panel 1 right here, and then we've got this second panel, but we're using the second panel as a framing device to, you know, carry on the first panel and that dialogue, that conversation that's happening in the car. We know is in this car as it's driving off. And we can do some fun things with the lights and having them stretch and pull through the environment. So then our next panel is that extreme close-up. Okay? And so we can put our extreme close-up down here and just bump this panel down a little bit farther. Okay? Hey, don't bite that. So if we put our extreme close-up panel where he says, "Oh no!" That's an intense script I'm putting together there. So he's, you know, big wow, big wow. And then we can draw the car and give it a little more, because we're going to separate two story actions here, okay? We've got our story action 1 that we talked about, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then our story action 2 starts in 4, 5, 6, okay? So if we have the car light up, okay, so here's our car like this in the foreground, but we're going to put some Kirby crackles or doodle bugs around there, some little dots, and oh, something's happening, you know. And then the next image, we have our two characters. What's happening? Pulling a Fred Willard. And here they are in the space, in the central space. So this sort of sings home this big different thing that's going on, that's taking place. This is the start of our second action, right? And then because we've got this closed silhouette top, okay, we can run that line straight across the bottom and separate it. We can even cut it inside so that we have a sense of continuance of the side of the page. But here's where we've got our two characters in our foreground. So hopefully this says, people in the car, there's the car, something's wrong. Car starts to crackle, and then we can have some interesting and dynamic way of going, "Wah!" like that. and then they end up in the middle of this arena. Where they're going, what? Huh? So that's taking these 4 separate situations here. Carb driving away, trees, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And sorry, in the first formal layout, uniform pacing, uniform size of image. It doesn't sell this right here, this moment in the center, where this is a transition to the second story action. It doesn't sell it as well. It's too sedate, right? Whereas if we can figure out a way to uniquely make you realize that these elements connected are that first action, okay? Whereas this is your transitional state, and then these two these two elements with your open panel layout is that second action. But I'm breaking it down now as 1, 2, 3. So it's the same 6 panels. It's the same kind of assessment of how do we go about doing that. Now this page, okay, in relationship to the previous layouts we had for page 1. Well, we know the formalism's out, right? The pure rock hard formalism 6 panels. That's gone. The challenge is, does this second page and this layout, whichever one we're starting to get particular towards, how does it connect to the first page breakdowns that I'm going to pull the camera back a little bit so we can get both of these sheets in. Okay, how do these two things connect to pardon me, the previously laid out 4 pages that we have for page number 1? Which one of these connects to our first page? Right? We know that page 2 is arguably unsuccessful because of the development that happens, the action that happens on the page. It's relatively unsuccessful. So the challenge that presents is going from utilizing this page 1. We know this doesn't work. So now we get to look at the other 4 interpretations and which one would follow closest to, if we're locked in on this layout. Okay, just arguably for a moment, let's say we are. So then let's look at our first layouts and then evaluate our second page layout, because it's a continued story of 3 pages, right? Right. So what are we going to do? What are we going to choose from that? There's the formalism, the horizontal formalism of page 2 isn't here. It's not here. We've got bop, 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 bop. So our page goes like this, okay? That's the directional movement of our page, is this zigzag down to the bottom thing. So the horizontal one and this one would feel a little bit disjointed. This one, right, which shakes it up a little bit, because it takes that formal aesthetic of those 4 levels. But we've got this panel, visual panel. You know, larger image holding in, larger image holding in. Okay, the break panels, break panel. And then this closure. Well, it's the same sort of thing right here, except where this moves up and down and this one moves side to side. Okay? You know how I feel about number 4. Let's go back to number 1. Number 1 may very well work the best with it, because number 1 has all kinds of directional movement with our page. So if number 1's page goes over here, down here, over to there, back to there, and across. Now, we're starting in our top left, we're ending up in our bottom right, but we're moving over, we're moving down into the center part, we're going over to a little bit, back into our corner, and over to the side, which is not entirely dissimilar in its sort of jaggedy pattern as our oddball lightning bolt that we have here for this layout for page 2. So arguably, these two would work better together than others. If anybody has an alternate viewpoint to that, put it in the comments or put it in the chat. But in my head, in my assessment, I would put these two together. So with that in mind, let's say I've settled on this, because I ideally want to get all three in for the stream today. So let's say I've settled in on this. Now I'm informed at this point for the narrative approach, the narrative style that I'm going to carry on for page 3 for those elements. So if this is page 1, the first 6 panels, and this is page 2, right? Panels 7 to 12, okay? So if I'm going to look at page 3 now, and I know for a fact that this sort of a structure, and I'll put it down right here, okay? So there's our guy, there's our small panel, there's the large panel that frames it around, here's this other small panel, and the car, and the closing panel on the page. Okay, there's our car. So there we go. Now, and our second page has this. It reverses it. Was that intentional? No. Worked out pretty good though, huh? So here's our page 2, and page 2 has this similar aspect to it. I don't know who's calling me. And then we've got, whoops, what am I doing? Sorry, I got distracted. My phone started ringing. Did Corbin answer it? No. What a cat. So here's our breakdown here, like so, and then we've got this character and this character, and then we've got this repetition of element there. So here's our first 2 pages. Okay? So our page 3. So I'm going to put down a couple of breakdowns here. Okay? Now, our page 3 has, right off the hop, it has an opening element. Or an open element, okay? A frame that doesn't have an enclosed presentation to it. All right? So, but again, we get to take license with how we're doing what we're doing. If this is our first approach, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 further images to do, we can shake this up by doing our first panel has the big zibbity zabbity doo camera thing, and our 2 characters, wah, you know, way too bright, my eyes hurt. And here's the camera taking a picture of them. Okay, so there's our panel 1. I'll zoom in again just to make this a little more clear. So we're presenting it as this open panel. Okay, so there's our first 2 and the layouts for those. Now here's our third one. Right, we've got our open panel. Now we have a close-up. This is a reflection of our 2 characters in the viewer of the flying camera thingamajigger bob. And but let's get a little more creative, just for our own interest's sake. Now in these previous pages, we've got the open car, okay, and we've the car without a border on it. Right here, we've got this open panel with the face in it. Okay, on our second page, we've got this open element with the 2 characters falling into the void. We've kind of got an open element by having this closed space and this closed space. but at the same time, the visuals are very wide open. Now, this is borderless. So how do we... So we can do this two different ways with our camera, okay? If we want, we can try to do our panel here, and I'm going to try a couple different layouts because this one's far more interesting. So here's our camera, and there's our two characters in the background. But then we go to this big, deep arena shot, okay? And this big arena, to give a sense of depth and scale and what's going on around them, okay? And here's our two characters in the center, and we got all kinds of these flying whirly-magigs all around there, okay? But this also serves as a break. We've got open, we go to the reflection, which is sort of like transitioning us out of this wide open panel, broken border panel thing, by going into the frame, and then we can pull out on the whole and just feel free to change the format of our panels. So now we're in the stadium or arena or zoo, and we open it up to this shot for the depth image, but we've still got these three: the downcast, the downshot cast shadow, sorry, right here, the side or top light, and then the profile or background. Okay? So if this is our last panel in the story on our third page, we need to have this image resonate more clearly. And so it would help by utilizing a larger frame to do so. So that sort of informs us that this next section is like so. Move this up. And then it leaves our couple. Now we can do it as a closed image, or we can step back into the open void again, because we know for a fact that as we're showing these guys in this hyper exposed, overly lit area, we just want to close it for our dialogue. But we want the reader to be left with the young couple as they look at each other and go, "Oh, Larry," and he looks at her and says, "Oh, Lou." I don't know. But so this sort of, and it sort of carries the same way with our repetitive elements there. Now, another way that we could do our approach to this is to have this camera motif of the camera flying, and here's the two people cowering in front of it. Okay, there's our panel one, wide open. Okay, then we close to a shot of the two of them in the camera frame and the lens, right? And that sort of gives, here's the camera coming at them, there's what the camera's seeing, and then we can go and cut across and present the big arena. Big wow, big wow. Look at that, really pushes the sense of depth on this, right? Really allows us to sort of have this more grandiose, oh my gosh, look where they are in this crazy large environment, which I think works probably better than this does, because it's just too, we're moving this way, but then we got to go back here and then back here and then back there and over here and down there. So it's just zigzag, 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 right? Whereas this moves over here and then into this big moment, right? And that just leaves us the two conversational parts of, here's, "Oh, Carlito, are we going to be happy here?" "We sure are, Ingrid." Right? And then he's like, "We sure are, Ingrid." And then here they are, and she says, "Oh, hold me, Sven." And he says, "You got it, Loretta." Be nice if I just stuck to like singular name for each one. But this way we've got, so if we're going to break down the shape of this page, we're doing this down to here, down to there, over here. So there's almost like a continuance of this line, okay? And then it all depends on where we place our text for how that moves. But here, there, there, there. So our shapes for the pages, page 1 is like so. Hold on a second. So here's our page 1, okay? Whoops, I did that off panel, and I apologize. There's page 1, all right? Page 2 is like this. Okay, there's our 2. And then now page 3 is so they kind of work. There's a similarity in that momentum, as opposed to the other examples we had that were largely horizontal, okay, or the ones that were just too, willy-nilly in their movement. In our as we were exploring what kind of visual language do we really want to use on our first page, coming to some sort of similar assessment on our second page, and then trying to carry that forward in developing our third page. Now, so here we go for the argument again. If you feel that one is more successful to you, that speaks to your sensibilities, that's great. However, I prefer 2. And the reason that I prefer number 2 is because of that flow of action. We want the attention here. We want the attention there. This breaks the attention. This diminishes the attention by having this panel overlapping it. So that's why I prefer this. We can give more space to the young lovers and the summation at the end. We can give more space to the big wow, big arena. And then 1, 2, big 3, 1, 2, big 6, right? So that gives us this, and I'm going to block this out. So that gives us, there's our panel shapes. There's our panel breakdowns of our 3-page story. There's a consistency of the way we're laying out the pages. There's a consistent amount of action. There's conveyance of the larger ideas on each page in a way that informs the reader. Here's the context of our first page. Here's the transition into our second page as they're leaving and going someplace else. And then something happens. Uh-oh. So there's 2 of those on that page. And then our third page says, here's where we are now. So this continues the second part of that page. Here we are, clear as day. Get in the car. Here we are, clear as day. Uh-oh, something's happening. Here we are, clear as day. And then the summation of the characters and saying, oh, I hope they have pork and beans. Well, I could do with the beans, but I'm not necessarily a big fan of the pork in the can. So, yeah. Or however it's going to work out. So that, and then for breaking down these panels and coming up with these interesting arrangements of pieces of information for how we're going to utilize different frame components, utilize different compositional approaches, the lazy layouts, as Wally Wood would call them for himself. We went and explored those by using the 18 panels and picking 18 different ones of the 24 that he provided us with, and Larry Hammond brought to our attention way back when. All right, I think this sort of brings us to a good point for launching off from here, for looking at Wally Wood's thing. What was he doing? What is he presenting us with? How can we interpret it ourselves and get a good idea of how we see these compositional layouts that he's provided us with to consider for our own drawings. So yesterday was trying to identify some of that, and then today is how do we utilize those on a panel. we can break down those different, layout, compositional layouts for each panel in a uniform kind of way. But as far as it goes for where we're going to take that for our story, this helps us and I'm not going to say it's a remedial, but this helps us in a sort of foundational way of here's how I can break this down. And if that works for you, then stay with it. And utilize that to give yourself a sense of comfort for how you go about progressing with your development of story ideas, so that when you move on and start doing these things and these explorations, you're doing it based on the foundation that you were learning from here. I hope, maybe. Corey says, I've got to go back and look at your other video on this. I love what you're doing with the analysis right now. Oh, thanks, Corey. So this might come off as heady for some. And it might come off as, wow, maybe Chris overthinks it. But after a while of applying these ideas for yourself, you're going to think like this less. Maybe you don't even need to do these sort of things after a while, and you just start getting into those pages, that meat and potato of your page. Maybe after a while you start doing these multiple layouts of those component pieces of information that are in your story. Maybe you just start to just lean back to allow yourself to intuit the sort of things that you want to put down and convey. And so when people say things like, oh, I want to draw like this person draws when they just draw the page, this sort of examples the journey to get there. So when I start drawing a page where I'll just start with a face and I just move the composition through, and then the other day I did Tony Danza. I think that was yesterday. Let me pull Tony Danza up, and we'll talk about Tony for a second. So Tony Danza is, the suggestion came from Jim L. Luan, and the suggestion is that's why we don't invite Tony Danza to our barbecues. That's all the suggestion was. So by utilizing some of those key pieces of information I want, Corey says, I love heady overthinking. I'm glad, because you're getting it here. So the key pieces of information, Tony Danza, we don't want him at our barbecues, and here's why. So if we start off with exploding barbecues, and then Tony presents his hypothesis of, hey, are you tired of this happening? That's why I boil all my meat in buckets from Home Depot. It's an absurd leap of idea, but we're getting our key pieces of identifiable information in there. Here's barbecues. Now we're really extending those by having the barbecues blow up. And then, but we're using that as the reasoning behind why he says what he says. But that's why we don't want him there. Boiling meat in buckets from Home Depot is not having a barbecue. Is the resulting summation of that. So when you look at the idea, while it never says that hopefully is the takeaway someone's going to have. But in the presentation of it, I've done 4 reduced size panels along the top of just barbecues exploding, just to really sell home these, this isn't working out. And then we have Big Tony, the big head, big idea. He's got the little giveaway of his Who's the Boss apron. It's like an inside joke for anybody who knows who Tony Danza is and knows who this Tony is now. And he says, hey, you don't want this to happen. That's why I do this. It's a piece, it's a moment of story that it just encapsulates an idea. There's so much more that you can do with this. There really is. There's so many. You can do a much larger exploration of this and a much larger narration of the idea, and have him walking across, blowing up barbecues through the scene. And hey, don't you hate when this happens? There's a million different things you can do. I was just going for the fast and dirty 1, 2, 3. And that's the fun thing about sequential storytelling is 1, 2, 3 can tell us 4, right? And maybe not. Some people might go 4. Some people might go into this, an alternate nostalgia path of, oh, Tony Danza, do you remember who's the boss? And they're gone for the next 20 minutes just because you've included Tony, so they can move off from the whole point of the page of, we don't want a guy who's going to boil meat in buckets from Home Depot at our barbecue. It's not barbecue. They go in a nostalgia route and just think about Tony Danza instead. So however we present our ideas, however we take whatever the basic elements of our story is and express those, maybe this method, maybe this approach of sitting down and breaking it down into this repetitive panel size, this repetitive panel layout, and just to keep it fresh and funky and interesting, use these and see if that informs more visual options for you to think about as you move forward. But try some of these for a while. And this application will keep every page from being Bob and Betty looking at each other going, hey Betty, do you want to get in a car? Yeah, let's get in the car. And in the next panel's the two of them walking side by side, but he's still looking at her going, Betty, you think the car's over here? Yeah, the car's over here. And that repetition is boring. So this shakes it up. All right, folks. That's about it for me today. I hope this has helped people. I think that this is a good point to launch off on a different tangent for me to explore and how to tell a story with words and pictures, and to let you experiment with the 22, 24, and to let you any of the suggestions that I've worked from, including the Tony Danza one, any of the ideas that, and I put those in my posts, whatever the suggestion was for the page I did that day. Feel free to look at any of those and try to interpret it your way. Try to do a page, or if you need pages, do pages, to explore those ideas. If you're at a point where you're like, well, I don't know what to do, look those up and to do your version. My version is wrong. Your version will be right. You are going to interpret it in a way that is wholly different from mine. Even if a person were to copy specifically what I'm doing, they're going to interpret it through, their own ability, their own perspective, right? But feel free to do that. Okay? And I'll be back tomorrow at 2 o'clock. And we'll play some more. In the meantime, go draw. Go have some fun. Thanks very much, everybody, for hanging out and taking part in today and taking part in the discussion. Thank you very much to Linda, the moderator with the mostest. And I hope this helps people out. Okay, and I hope that this encourages you to realize that I can break down these story things. Oh, Susanna says she's got one. Bye, Susanna. Thanks for coming by. I hope this helps to encourage you to see that you can break down this storytelling into simple forms, and see how that presents you with the ability to pursue the objective that you might have some interest in. Okay? Because I look forward to reading what you're doing. Chris Maycock says, I just subscribed. Oh, fantastic. Welcome aboard, Chris. Okay, I'll be back tomorrow at 2 o'clock. We'll have some more fun. In the meantime, thank you, everybody. Hope you have a great day. Go draw something. I'll see you tomorrow.